All right, what's up, guys? We're actually going to do a spoiler review for Stormlight Archive book number 5, Wind and Truth. And we're going to organize it into 3 different segments. The first one is going to be just airing out our grievances, anything that we had disappointing moments, just anything we felt like we wanted better, our criticisms, all that stuff. And then after we do all the negatives, we'll get into the positives, what we really loved about it. And then the last one will be ranking the books. But I'll probably separate into 3 videos. This one is going to be the first one, which is, let's start with criticisms and negatives.
Yeah. Do you have any criticisms or negatives to this book?
I feel like I have a good amount. There's number 1, Yasuna, the Yasuna stuff.
Are you talking about like the prisoner's dilemma or her debate?
Her debate, basically.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem that I've had.
Yeah,
has been that.
But we'll list out a few, and then we can get into them a bit more deeply. So that was one. I felt like the stuff at the Shattered Plains wasn't like that strong. I wanted it to be a lot stronger for me personally. And then I think those were the main 2 for me personally.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm sure once we talk more, we'll get into a few more. Do you have anything that you feel like?
Yeah, no, a lot of the stuff that I have is, again, the Yasna stuff. The stuff in Thaylen City was kind of bad. Well, not bad. I'd just say it's not the way that I thought it was going to go, but also it's kind of edited in a weird way, but we'll get into that. For me, I like the Shattered Plains stuff. I found that to be fun.
That's a good...
But for me, it's like the half of Adolin and Azir, I could have gone without.
Okay.
But then there's a certain part where it becomes interesting. Like, okay.
Gotcha.
A lot of the other stuff is little editing things that I noticed while reading this where it was just kind of, for me, a little buggy, but that's just me being a nitpicky.
Okay, so we have 2 points of contention then. So the number 1 is Shattered Plains, so we can start with that one. And then number 2, I actually really enjoyed Adolin's storyline like throughout. Personally,
I think because it's mixed in with the Vision Quest stuff. Like, I'd rather go to the Vision Quest stuff.
What do you mean by Vision Quest?
That's like with Dalinar, Navani, Gavinor,
Gotcha.
Shallan, Renar, and like all those people. Like, that stuff is way more interesting because that's the stuff that I really enjoy. And then it cuts back to Adolin, where I've talked to several people and like it's a different type of disconnect because I enjoy all that backstory stuff and the lore. Because for me, as a big Cosmere person, like, it's interesting to hear things from like Tanavast and kind of the different perspectives. Then you get back to Adolin and like, and they kept fighting. Like, okay. And then you cut to like the cool stuff with like Kaladin and Seth, and I'm like, oh, cool, this is great, this is amazing. And you come back to Adolin and he's just doing okay.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
But then there's a point where it becomes interesting. Like the second Adolin loses his leg and things are kind of falling and failing is when I found it to be more interesting than the beginning half, because I felt like narratively it probably was going to end up where it all, by the 10th day, everything's terrible.
I think I feel what you mean. So I'm an audiobook listener. So for me, I definitely felt those moments when it changed like narrative perspectives, and I was like, well, I feel like that's an abrupt change. Like I kind of want to go back to the other one. It's almost like when you watch something and then it's like it ends on a cliffhanger, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not ending, it's just going somewhere else.
Well, for me, it reminds me a lot of how this book is structured, because this book could have been way longer. It feels like the ending of Oathbringer, where you're having the different perspectives changing constantly. Because each chapter would have at least 2 different perspectives, at least, unless it's like a flashback chapter. So you're always getting different perspectives and people around the world, and you have to really be paying attention, because 1 minute it can go from, and then Renarin is hanging out and doing things, and then it cuts to, Adolin, or halfway across the world or halfway across time in many ways. And it can be a little jarring, but I can see how it works in many ways. But also for me, it's most of the stuff that's having to keep up with so many characters. It feels like I'm rereading Wheel of Time again, where I had to put like sticky notes in my book to remember what's happening, where everyone is, and kind of making like, this is what's happening in the world. But I should keep in mind that I read this book in 3 days. Nonstop. Like the last day I read 600 pages straight. And some things might have gotten lost in the translation a little bit.
Yeah. Save for audiobook, I listened to it, I think, over the time span of like four 4 days.
That's like 62 hours. It's
Yeah,
like something.
but you can times two it.
Yeah, okay,
like
yeah.
you start off with like 1.5 and then gradually increase it, and you don't notice that much of a difference. Your brain starts to pick things up faster. But at the same time, it still leaves a lot of room for like missing details. You kind of capture the primary things and forget. And it's also been like a week or two since we finished.
And for me, as I was reading, because I also read this digitally, is that I would, every time that I saw something, oh cool, I would just highlight it.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would like brain dump everything into it so I could come back and like look at the little things like, oh, this was interesting, this is cool. And then I had like a correspond with my girlfriend who's also reading it almost at the exact same speed, and she'd pick some things up and I'd pick some things up,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of like have our little tit for tat for it, and it was interesting.
Nice. Yeah, that's one thing that's the reason why we're doing this, is because I feel like I need someone to talk to about it, because Stormlight is like one of my favorite series of all time.
Same.
So I want like other people's opinions. I want to talk about it basically.
Yeah.
I wasn't originally planning on doing this, but I'm like, who do I know that actually is into this? And I'm like,
oh, it's Zach.
So that's why I invited you to do
He
this.
also lives like relatively close.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh, like definitely a good opportunity.
Yeah, no, the fun thing is where I work, because I work for like a theme park, is a lot of the technicians that I work with all read Stormlight.
Really?
So for me, I wanted to be the first to finish the book. Everyone else is kind of like, oh my god, I got to this, and I got to this, I got to this. It's been very least productive at work, but it's also fun. It also doesn't help that for me, reading this was the hardest, because the book released, I was at Dragonstone Nexus, so everyone was at different reading levels, and it was hard to like, I would read and gasp at like a certain section, and I'd be like, have to like, people be like, please don't. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And like, people will be waiting in line reading. Like, I was like reading, half reading, and just plugging my ears. It was actually like a interesting experience, because like probably would have gone to finish the book quicker if it wasn't for the convention.
Gotcha. Well, that's cool that you went.
Yeah.
Anyways, we went on a big tangent.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, it's like, I think we should go to the Yasna stuff, because I found that to be...
Sure.
I enjoyed some of the Yasna stuff, but when it came to that chapter, the prisoner's dilemma, I found that to be the worst argument I've ever seen, because it's a realist debating against a philosopher and losing horribly, because both are horrible people. And it just didn't seem that engaging.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's been a while. Again, 2 weeks, so I don't remember all the detailed arguments, but I just remember the feeling of like, why is this happening the way it is happening? Because Taravangian Odium was like, you're gonna convince her for me, right? And then Yasna doesn't have to do anything or say anything until Taravangian brings things up, but she decides to like say things anyways, and I feel like that to me seemed like self-sabotage.
Well, I think that's kind of the point. That's kind of Yasna's character. The first time, even in the first flashback, we see of her trying to kill her, oh my god, the king's wife.
Allocar's
wife is that you already know she's not a good person, and they bring up, her murdering all those people to prove a point to Shallan. But the point is that, I think it's an interesting dynamic that they had. It just doesn't work because you have Taravangian or Todium. Like, he's hung out with Yasna enough to know that he doesn't have to say much, because she'll just start talking and debating for her, or prove his arguments, because he just has to attack her character and not herself.
Yeah, but I don't know. It seemed too, like, I feel like Yasna is too smart to fall for something like that, and also like, Fen was already on her side. She was already like, I'm not going to side with Odium. And I feel like all Yasna needed to do was be like, yeah, we are allies, and we're up against this clearly like evil god who wants nothing but destruction, and has definitely lied before, and has definitely
he's done some. They also don't know that he's done some other horrible things. Like, if it was, because the interesting thing about Odium is he knows all the stuff about Yasna, but she doesn't know all the stuff about Taravangian. Like, I destroyed Kharbranth.
That's true.
I have a murder hospital for all like the death rattles.
Yeah. But I feel like he clearly betrayed them.
Well, yes.
In year 0, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but that's like one thing, but they don't know the whole extent. But a lot of it is, I had the problem of it is a person talking circles around another person, and it's kind of, you end up where Yasna, I honestly think that Yasna needed a couple, problems, or kind of like, this is how she grows in the back half, is like, this is like a defining moment for her. But at the same time, the way that it's handled isn't as fun as it, or as impactful as it should be, because it's just her basically hoisted by her own petard rather than, having a debate. It doesn't feel like a debate, and I'm sure Brandon probably had some debate beta readers that, for me, it hits a lot of those things, but for me it falls flat because I'm not a philosopher, and I can't really. For me, I'm it's kind of like a fly on the wall and trying to figure out, is it a good argument or is it not? I'm curious, like, as like an audiobook reader, does it? I guess is it just who reads? Is it Kate Redding or is it Michael who reads like those? I guess
I think it was Kate Redding.
It would have been Kate,
but
how that comes across.
It felt like I don't blame the narration whatsoever. No. I thought they did a great job, but it just felt like. I actually distinctly remember like being in a Target while listening to this, but like during that debate, I was just like, what is happening? Like, why is she like continuously talking about like philosophy and all this random crap during the debate when Fen is there and stuff like that, when all she needs to do is literally just tell Fen like, yo, look, I'm your ally. I'm on your side. Like, we're gonna clearly fight this evil god together who has betrayed us at some point, who is probably looking for loopholes in the agreements that they're making, all that stuff,
Well, yeah.
Like,
well, there's that, and also the thing with Fen, and not trying to, I guess, being devil's advocate, is when it comes to the Thalens and Thalen City, is they worship the passions, which is odium. So it doesn't help that she's going based off of her own passion and kind of like, what is best for me in the long term. But then again, it's like the second you bring up all these horrible things that Yasna's a hypocrite, like, yeah, but she could also have said that like years ago and been like, yeah, I'm not the best person, but the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few at this current moment. And Fen's like, yeah, okay. But then again, we're first introduced with Fen in this book as she's in a boat making love to not her husband.
I see.
So it's I guess it's an interesting juxtaposition. But yeah, no, I think the debate part is a thing, like, as a person that doesn't study philosophy or knows anything about debating, I don't know if it's a good or bad debate.
Yeah, me neither. I just know.
And that's my own ignorance, I should say.
But to me, it doesn't matter. Like, we're sort of like in the position of Fen, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that Fen isn't like this amazing debater or whatever.
No, she's not. She's the person she's us. She's the one you're trying to convince.
Exactly. So that's why, from our perspective, it's like, Yasna just did such a bad job. Maybe that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, she's trying to debate a god when she's an atheist.
Yeah.
Well, he's not really a god, lowercase g, in the sense, but like it's someone that also his entire life has studied philosophy. But at the same time, it's hard. Like, the debate is more about a person's character than the actions.
Sure, but the point for me is that I felt like Yasna should be smart enough to know her audience, to know Fen, and to know that she didn't need to hear all this philosophical mumbo jumbo. It's just like, she just needed reassurance that Yasna is a clear ally that will stay by her side. Yeah. And that's it.
And for me, again, that's maybe also, again, I read this very accelerated, but I remember like reading that and having all these emotions, but also kind of like rolling my eyes in the sense of like, she could have just been quiet. But again, it's kind of like the I guess like I see what Brandon's trying to do. What he's trying to do is, Yasna's trying to fail, because the else caller thing is basically self-improvement or learning to do better. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of probably going to be her arc,
like reaching potential.
Yeah, reaching her true potential, and she has to hear all these hard truths before she can move on. But the way that's handled is, yes, it's bad. Everything about that was bad. But at the same time, like, there's other ways to go about the debate. I don't know. I'm sure if people are probably have their own thoughts and opinions about it. And for me, it just, when Thalen City fell, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I had in the back of my head, oh, is everything just going to fail now? 'Cause I thought that was going to happen. I thought everything terrible is going to happen. Because for me, it's like reading The Lost Metal, like reading some of like the sheets. You see that, Roshar is not in a good place right now.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the way people talk about Roshar in like the almost a third person narrative is, oh, something's weird. I don't know. Have you read the preview chapters for Isles of the Emberdark?
Mm-mm.
But they kind of talk about things in like a weird way. So it's like when you see how everything fails, I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is what's going to happen. But in the end of the day, I felt like the scene didn't have the right impact, but also I might not have been, I'm sure maybe like to a philosopher or someone that debates a lot, it's a thrilling, interesting argument. But for me, the prose didn't work, and the way that it was written for me fell flat. But for me, that's like the biggest hurdle. Everything else in this book, I really did enjoy. It was just that one chapter. Even my girlfriend read it, and she's like, I don't really like Yasna in this. Like, like everyone that I've talked to agrees this is probably the weakest chapter. It's probably maybe an area that Brandon probably didn't have that much expertise in, and he probably got outsourced.
Yeah, but I think the reason why a lot of people felt that way, or at least my hypothesis, is that Yasuna was just built up to be this amazingly competent character, and she was portrayed in the most incompetent way.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the thing that bothers me too.
Yeah.
Is I know where the end is, but it's like getting to there is the most excruciating part because she has to fail spectacularly.
Yeah, because if Yasuna is like this amazingly intelligent, smart person, then how come I can think of like the fact that Fen doesn't need to hear all this shit and she can't? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's also the spur of the moment, but yeah, I mean,
I guess she was tired too.
Yeah,
but.
yeah,
yeah. But that's pretty much it for Yasuna's thing. Like that was probably the biggest thing. But then for me, the Shattered Plane stuff, I do want to talk about this because you like it more than I do. I'm curious about your perspective.
Well, for me, I like Sigil, and I think that stuff is more interesting because going into I'm interested to see how people that haven't read The Sunlit Man reading this book and then reading Sunlit Man.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because I read Sunlit Man first. But I feel like because I read Sunlit Man first, I thought
there's a different perspective that you get.
Yeah,
because you know that there's no like he has to survive. There's no stakes for Sigil.
Yeah, but also like how did he end up turning out like the way he did in Sunlit Man? Like what actually happened? And then I feel like what actually happened wasn't that.
Well, we don't know everything yet.
We don't know everything, but we know that he clearly renounced his oath, right? That was one of the things.
And then he becomes a Skybreaker.
True.
Which happens later. We see Ox and kind of the beginning of that. I think for me, the thing that bothers me the most about this is all the Moash stuff in this.
Yes, exactly. That's a huge thing, actually. This might be worse than Yasuna. I think this is worse than Yasuna.
Well, I mean, for me, like it's like you go from. Here's the funny thing, like going back from Dragonstone Nexus, this is horribly dating it, but I was in the panel, or not in it, but I was watching the panel in the defense of Moash, and people like, oh, he's gonna be this great person, he's gonna have all this redemption arcs, and then you read it, and it's like, oh no, he's way worse, and now he's like almost like a Steel Inquisitor, like it's like, but it's. I think what I liked about this, and you might have a disagreement, is that it isn't that Sigil is failing, but the word here I'm looking for is it's the moments of like you're seeing all of his brilliance happening and just falling onto the pages, and Moash is the one that kind of deals with a lot of this stuff. Yeah. It kind of is the thorn in the side, and you have like the death rattles. I don't know if, for me, theory wise, I still think Moash is going to kill Sigil. I think that death rattle is still going to happen, but later on.
Right, but I mean, how would that happen though? Because like,
well, I mean, it's going to be based off of, I think, this theory-wise, is that the time dilation for Roshar is 80 years. Sigil isn't there; he's like left because he's gone with the Iriali.
Oh, I see.
So he's gonna come back, I think, post Sunlit Man. He's had all these experiences, even though it's the space age. Time dilation and all that stuff. But I think him coming back, knowing all these new magic systems, and being like a pseudo Hoid. And being like, I've learned all my mistakes, and then defeating Moash would be interesting. Or coming to accept that there's things in the Cosmere that you can't forgive.
Sure, but I still don't like Moash as a character.
Oh no, he's
right
terrible in this book.
Yeah, I just don't understand him at all. There's nothing given for him. He kind of just shows up, attacks Bridge 4, and leaves. Like,
Well, that's his last introduction. Like, did I miss something? Like, at the end of the book, did I miss what happened to Moash? Like, I'm like flipping back through the book because it's like Lopin and all these former Bridge 4 people come.
Yeah.
Like, kick his, like, they do the JoJo meme of like kicking him while he's down, then he flies away, like in the last book. In the book before that, where he just disappears. And the problem with Moash is he's not a good villain because he keeps failing in horrible and miserable ways. Like, I guess here's the interesting thing, right? Is he's also now a hypocrite because he hates Bright Eyes,
yeah.
but now in Light Eyes, and now he literally is a Light Eye. Like, figuratively and physically, he's now has Light Eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like he isn't a character without Kaladin. Like, his whole character in book 2, I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when he actually starts becoming that villain. And I agreed with him to a certain extent. Like, he actually had real goals and everything. Mm-hmm. But after that point, after he killed Alucard, like, to me, that's also still fun. He wants to, like, fulfill his vengeance.
Yeah.
Like, book 4 him, I can sort of understand.
Well, no, I can't, because at that point he's truly evil, because like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give this man visions until he kills himself.
Yeah.
That is literally word for word basically what he says.
But he's under the influence of Odium at that point.
Yeah, but he's still under the influence of Odium in book 5 too. I think what would have been interesting, right, is almost the mirror image where Kaladin becomes a herald and Moash should have become a fused. Mm-hmm. So you can have them keep fighting. I think that would have been an interesting twist. Is if Moash became a fused.
I mean, that might happen.
That might happen for all I know. But it would
Yeah.
have been an interesting twist where they're always kind of in this battle now.
Yeah, but I just feel like for this one, when he was released and he was regretting killing Taft, like, there was so much there, and it was just all thrown away because, like, Odium's like, okay, you can just feel whatever you want now.
Well,
And then we get nothing from that. We get nothing
well,
but, like...
no, now he feels something different, and it's going to be interesting because I had this conversation. Is, you know what he's feeling? Retribution. No, that's not a joke. That's like literally what he's starting to feel. It's kind of the first tease of what retribution is going to be. Is he feels like, I can have pain, but I'm going to use this pain to fuel my desires and my goals.
Yeah, but what are his goals? Like,
Well, at this point, they've kind of, there's nothing. Everything's kind of gone kaput. But I think
it just seems like he just wants to kill Bridge 4, and to me that makes zero sense. You know. Like, I needed a bit more from him, as well as the interactions. Like, why didn't someone from Bridge 4 ask him or, like, talk with him, be like, you know, why are you doing this? Like, why did you kill Taft? Like, what's going on? Why wasn't there this dialogue that happened between them, you know? It felt too rushed, too, like, nothing, like, no substance.
Well, and he also
there.
like leaves, and you don't hear from him ever again. You're gonna see him in the next 15 years, basically being the same. See, what I like about Moash in this one is that I like that, you know, we kind of are seeing a different version of hemalurgy with him. That's the stuff that I find cool. When it comes to his character, it's like a wet bag of cement. Like, he's just there. But again, it's like, this could have happened to anyone else and it would have been cooler. But I think for me, what I would have enjoyed more is that, you know, he was Odium's champion, not Taravangian's. And then Taravangian just throws him off to the side, and he doesn't do anything. Like, but you said you were taking my pain away and things like this. That would have been more interesting instead of still being kind of Odium's right hand man in like 15 quotation marks.
Yeah, because he was built up to be this character and built up to have like this pathway, right? Because he was interesting for sure in book 2, 3, and then 4. You're sort of like questioning like what's going on, because at that point you're like, he's done his thing by killing Alucard. What's next for him? And then clearly he's under the influence of Odium, but now that it's released, it's like, what's going to happen?
Well, yeah.
But what ended up happening was nothing changed. And I think that's the huge disappointment, is that, like, despite the fact that he feels regret and he feels everything and he has new eyes and new powers, like, he would have done the same exact thing had none of that happened to him. So that to me seems like such a huge disappointment.
Well, the thing that I find interesting and also kind of aggravating with Moash is everyone else is more human, where he's losing a lot of his humanity. The things that he's basically being what he thinks Alucard was going to be, is this inhumane monster. And every book, something is being stripped away from him. You know, it's Bridge 4, then his name, then his sight, then he regains his sight, but in like a weird, messed up way, and things like that. I see what is happening, but at the same time, it's happening to someone that has no clear motivations.
Yeah.
Unless there's a motivation that I'm not seeing.
No,
And, yeah.
trust me. I don't think you're.
And it would have been an interesting.
I'm missing something.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to have like a epilogue with him or something, where he goes away and he's not even on the planet anymore, or he's doing something.
Yeah, I just think that his character like has been reduced to like a nothing character, and
Well, yeah.
that's very unfortunate.
Well, the other stuff that I did like is the stuff of the listeners and Eshonai. I found that to be, because I don't like, it's funny how in the last book I hate Eshonai, but in this book I found it more interesting because you had like chasm fiends and them working together and ultimately making their little, you know, the Shattered Plains is now their
Yeah.
nation.
Are you talking about Venli or Eshonai?
Oh, sorry, Venli and Eshonai. Sorry, they have
I
the
mean,
same
in
flash,
the-
but yeah,
yeah,
Venli.
in the last book, yeah.
Sorry, my bad.
But in this book, it's all Venli.
It's
right?
all Venli.
Yeah.
But you know, it's kind of, for me, it's that stuff I found interesting with like the listeners.
Yeah. I thought
and
it was interesting too.
all that stuff. Again, the stuff with Sigil, I enjoy him failing, but then again, it's also failing from the foresight of the Sunlit Man and things like that. I think it's also interesting to see how, for me, Sigil has to work with being the leader when he's like, I can't be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a scholar. I work with Hoyd. Like, I was his apprentice.
Yeah, I thought there were good moments for sure. I did like some of the battle scenes, but I just felt like the whole time I felt like I was wondering like what's gonna happen based around like the Sunlit Man, like thinking while thinking.
That's
of
the problem though. I'm interested to see like when people read
Yeah.
Stormlight 5 before Sunlit Man, what their interpretations are, because there's no stakes.
Yeah, I'm also very interested in that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it was a mistake to. I also felt that way while reading Sunlit Man. I was like, well, this is like a bit much because
This feels like cheating, doesn't
yeah,
it?
it feels like cheating. It feels like I shouldn't know this information. This I think is gonna like reduce some of my enjoyment.
Well, did you know like in Sunlit Man that it was Sigil until the very end, or did you?
I think
Because I had known going into the book.
I think I like briefly heard something about it or read something about it, but I wasn't sure. And then the more I kept reading, initially I was like, oh yeah, this isn't Sigil. What did I read? I don't know. And then eventually,
It clicks.
It clicks, especially when he was like, Cal.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
is that you? And then it's not. And I'm like, oh, okay. This basically reveals that Kaladin for sure stays alive, which isn't like a huge reveal because you would assume that anyways.
Well, you don't know that he's seeing a vision. It could also be his regret. Which, ironically, technically, he's not alive anymore, but also is alive. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get the feeling, or at least from the book, it implied that Kaladin would still be alive after book 5. But again, that wasn't a huge thing. It was more so just like it gave a lot of clues to what might happen in book 5, and I don't like that sometimes. I prefer to have everything be a surprise.
Well, I mean, moving on a little bit with that is, speaking of surprises, I got a big old spoiler at Dragonsteel when I went to the ball, is because they had the wedding scene where they had Chana.
Oh yeah.
So that was like in the ball, they had a woman in red hair like screaming and saying like my daughter and things like this.
Oh my gosh.
And Hoyd was like, oh, you're back to Braves with you. And like, oh no, this is true. But then like knowing that going into that book, I think this is the most aggravating thing, but it's more of like an editing thing, is every time they would talk about Chana in the flashbacks, they'd always introduce her with red hair. You made sure that you knew that she had red hair until the big reveal, which didn't feel like a earned reveal. If you're like, because I'm a big person for Chana, was
Yeah.
Shallan's mom. So for me, it was like the most heavy-handed foreshadowing I had ever seen, even prior to, if I didn't go to the ball and knew that.
And honestly, if you watched any theory video out there on YouTube, like everyone was talking about
that's
it.
not a secret.
It's not a secret. But I still liked it though. I still enjoyed that.
No, that's like one of my favorite things. It's like one of my favorite little moments that you're saying what happened. But at the same time, it was just like little things, because I think this is the first book that Brandon doesn't have his original editor or line editor,
Oh, really?
Moshe. So you can kind of feel like this book was also heavily edited because it needed to. There's no Ars Arcanum in the back because all of it is just all Stormlight.
I see.
But there's like little things in this book that you can see. You know, even though line editor's job is to go line for line, like look at things, you can kind of see that touch. And you know, he has like a mountain of editors, so it's interesting to see what was in and kind of how his voice has kind of changed over the years, especially with Stormlight. But for me, that was the one thing I did not like in this book, is kind of that foreshadowing didn't work. And also the other big thing is I didn't like the Ghostbloods in this book.
Really?
Yeah, they were like the worst.
Yeah, I did kind of feel like they were a little incompetent at times.
It's crazy because in Shallan's head there's like this big old threat, and then you go to Lost Metal and it's like, oh, they're completely different, but these ones are really bad. And now this book ends, I'm like, okay, like Kelsier's like, yeah, oh no, I'm so sad. Not really. Well, do you want to work for me, Shallan, and things like this? And like, okay, because now that Era 3 is called for Mistborn's Ghostbloods, I'm like, oh, we still keep having these people that are horribly either incompetent or not a threat, or what's their main goal? And for me in this book, they almost were like cartoonish, like Mraize and Yaddle.
I feel that.
Yeah, we're kind of just there.
Yeah.
And for me, it's kind of just like, oh, Mraize is just kind of an asshole, and Yaddle was just kind of just there. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, why are they a threat now? Like, they've done all these horrible things, but now it's like, now we're going to make sure that, you know, we can get Stormlight and all this stuff. Ha 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 ha. Oh, I'm dead. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it did kind of feel like their plot didn't, like, everything that was built up for their plot wasn't really utilized very well.
Yeah.
Like, there was this huge build up for them to be a huge villain and
or a big
organization
threat.
or a big threat. Yeah. And I felt like in this final book for this era, the first half of Stormlight, it just didn't deliver on that.
Yeah, well, I think it's also the idea of what's the best way to put it is it's like Kelsier isn't there to basically be like, what are you guys doing? You guys are all dumb because he can't leave the planet. So it's almost like
I mean, but they have communication with
They
him.
do have communication, but it's also like doing a Zoom meeting with the boss that isn't on location and all the workers like fucking around and doing nothing all day.
Yeah, but you remember that meeting room with all the influential people there,
Yeah.
right? Like they had to have been doing much more, right?
Yeah,
I
and
wish
then
they
it's-
explored more of that.
Well, I don't know why they didn't talk about that with either Mraize or Yaddle. Kind of like, I feel like there's more implications, and I feel like Era 3 with Ghostbloods is going to have to do with the ramification of them messing up and kind of ruining the reputation, or kind of like reestablishing maybe their relations with Roshar now that there's no more Stormlight, and kind of Kelsier's big plan. Though now we know one big thing is that cognitive shadows can reproduce.
Okay. Yeah. That's true.
So I'm sure we'll see little Kelsiers all over the goddamn place.
Man, that's a good point. I didn't even really think about that too much. Because the vision stuff is mixed in with like Dalinar's and Nirvani's thing, and it's like with Shallan and R'hllane and Renarin all being there, like the plot lines kind of mix a lot.
Yeah.
For them, which is not a bad thing, but like I feel like the stuff with Dalinar and Nirvani's like totally overshadowed a lot of the other things until the very end, when you know they had the fight and Renarin and R'hllane freed Mishram. So
Which I don't know if it's good or bad, but we'll find out eventually. But yeah, I mean, overall, like, there's a lot of things like I can like, you know, walk around in circles, like kind of talk about the things that I don't like. But the problem though is there's a lot, the stuff that I don't like is overweighed by the stuff that I really do like about this book. This is a really solid book, but there's still, you know, in a book that's over 1,000 pages, you can still have some nitpicks because
of course.
I think the audiobook it's the longest. It's like almost 70 hours or something.
Yeah, 60 something, I think.
It's like 60 something, but it's like in the books, you know, you could like smash someone in the face with that. You could be okay. Like, but in the end of the day, that's like millions of words. Actually, I think it's 500,000 words.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. It's a big chunky book, but you know, there's still things you can find, and depending on how steep you're on the Cosmere, there's weird niche things that you can find that you don't like. But for me, in the surface level,
I'll tell you what one of my other biggest gripes is.
Yeah, what?
Gavinor.
Oh, you're talking. Okay. Well, here's the thing: is for me when it comes to Gavinor, I already called years ago. It's going to be Dalinar fighting a baby, but then it's like going through the like they talk about time dilation stuff. Like, oh, this motherfucker's going to be a man by the end of this, and I'm like, oh wait, well,
But
it's the worst. I think I thought Brandon wasn't going to do that. I thought the twist was going to be Dalinar is both champions.
I see.
And it's going to be he can't fight himself, so it's an automatic tie. So where everything is sets, because that's the loophole. The loophole is they didn't make anything. What if they tie?
I suppose. Yeah, but it didn't happen that
Yeah, it
way.
didn't happen that way.
And what happened? I just like felt
It's worse.
Yeah, I was just like, how did that end up happening? Like, I get the logical explanation, but it's just like everybody else's age was totally fine, you know? Everybody else was intact. And I understand that Todium was the reason why, you know, his time dilation thing is different and everything like that. But like, why didn't Odium do the same for Dalinar? Make him miss the thing. Why didn't Odium do the same for like...
I think they're built in the rules. He has to be there. If not, it would be Odium cheated. And that would... Something in the contract would default that. But there isn't anything about turning a baby into a man. Which is like, there's so many weird ethical implications to it as well. And now that he's going to be a man in the back half too, it's like...
Yeah, well, but why not affect like Navani, for instance?
Shallan or like Navani, like turn her old, like super old, and make her incapable of doing her job. Yeah. There's just so many things Odium could have done that to mess with Dalinar.
Like I felt like the rules were just way too like ambiguous.
Well, I think that's kind of the crux, isn't it? That they made this contract very quickly. Rather than waiting.
Well, not the contract, but just like the spiritual realm.
Oh, the spiritual realm.
It's too ambiguous to like what can be done and what can't be done, which I understand is part of the story.
That's kind of the part of also the spiritual realm, is it's very much like the metaphysical nature of concepts, rather than the cognitive realm is everything you think of and you believe, rather the physical is things you can touch. The spiritual realm is the place where people go, and every time we've seen it is characters transitioning from the spiritual realm to the great hereafter, which we don't know what happens there, but here it's more the realm of gods. Like we've seen it with Vin with the spiritual realm when she ascended, and Wax, I believe, did as well. Wayne definitely did, and then he went to the hereafter. But this is like the place where like harmony and all the shards kind of commingle.
Yeah.
And then there's things we know that can happen too. Like you can hide a whole ass city of people.
Yeah.
Which I think opens a can of worms, because now you can use the spiritual realm for like weird time. Even though there's no time travel in the Cosmere, you can still use time dilation things as plot devices now.
Yeah.
So now that's in it, and it's not like you're locked out of it unless. Well, I guess you technically are, because there's no Truth Watch. No, Truth Watchers. There's no
All Scholars? No.
No. Oh my God. Oathbringers. Why am I having a fart now? The Dalinar and Navani. Bondsmiths. Bondsmiths. Okay. So they can't open up perpendicularities, and their thing's kind of a fluke, but here I am.
I mean, Navani's still alive.
She's in a coma.
Yeah, but I'm sure eventually she'll get out of it.
Yeah, eventually, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There was just some mumbo jumbo stuff happening on occasion with the spiritual realm, and I didn't enjoy it that much because it just felt like too many rules were made up on the spot. A lot of conveniences for both sides happened, and I just felt like if those conveniences can happen all the time, like, and be utilized all the time, like one side could easily just like wipe out the other ones if they're in the spiritual realm.
Well, yeah. Well, you can also erase things from existence, apparently, but that's like here nor there. Yeah, and then you have the stuff like Noadon. Like, is he Noadon, or is he secretly Aldenauseum's cognitive shadow?
Ooh, that's a good.
That's making bread.
That's an interesting one.
That's what I'm thinking.
I didn't even think of that. He just felt like such a
because now we know that shards can fake their deaths. Why not Aldenauseum, who's all the shards, be like, yeah, I left all my godly powers and I'm hiding. I want to see how because it's if you read The Way of Kings, like in this book, you see it's about a king giving up his power and letting his children flourish.
Ooh, that's a good theory. I like it. I didn't even
Because
think
that would
think
be
of
an
that.
interesting twist that he never was really gone. He just wanted to see how maybe his time ended, and he wanted to see how the Cosmere as a whole would flourish. But then maybe we'll find out in Dragonsteel eventually. I don't know.
Yeah,
I might be horribly wrong.
but I think that's another
Argument.
main gripe. I think that's the last main gripe that I have is
Yeah.
with Gavinor.
Well, I mean, it's also like not a fun fight scene because it's the I can't kill my grandson. Though I would have found it more interesting if he was still a baby, because then it's an ethical dilemma of do I do the thing? Am I the Blackthorn? Am I going to kill this child like I killed my wife, all those people, or I can't do it? You know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Because at that point, it would have also.
I think we already knew the answer though, because at that point, Dalinar is definitely not going to do
He's
it.
not going to do it, but then
Yeah.
it's the ethical dilemmas. Is it the right thing to do? Is not do it or do it? And that seems like a more interesting philosophical debate than the Osna stuff.
Sure, but a debate in itself for others, but for
Yeah.
Dalinar, we know the answer.
We know, but it's the same concept of there might be another way. Then if he forfeits, then he becomes a fused, and it's way worse for the Cosmere because it's like one person or billions. Because then the contract ends, and he'd have to be well, I forfeit. Well, I could become a fused. Now I'm a general, and now they're free to go into the Cosmere and kill untold billions in this horrible genocide. But then we get into Dalinar's ultimate plan, which I enjoy, is his stuff. But we'll get into that.
Let's close off on the negatives from here. We will jump in to the positives
Yes.
now.